Now, chapter 33 and the imperative. We have thought about the non-indicative moods here recently in chapters 31 and 32. We'll review those in a moment and then think about the imperative. Let's pray together. Lord, help students as they think about commands, about how those commands express urgency, sometimes express authority as well. And I pray that you will help them with vocab, help them as well in remembering participles. In these non-indicatives, participles can get lost as we're not giving as much attention to them. Help them in their Greek text so that they can maintain fluidity with all these parts of speech. I ask in Christ's name, amen. I mentioned in my introductory note there in prayer are moods that we have looked at already. We've looked at the indicative, again, statements of an indication of reality from the perspective of the speaker or author, the writer. So from their point of view, my little glasses here, it is reality that they're thinking about. The subjunctive, on the other hand, is a looking under the hood of a vehicle. I will do my best with some artwork here, but you've got your vehicle, and underneath the hood, if it's pulled up, there are various instruments here, and imagine someone who is explaining what's going on underneath the hood. That's the subjunctive. It's hypothesis. It's theory in a positive sense, not, well, hypothetically speaking, as if something were completely improbable. There is a range of possibility and probability, but here we are explaining not so much reality on the surface, but beneath the surface, underneath. Though there may be sort of a sketched reality in place as well. But the point is not reality, the point is explanation. That's what differentiates the indicative and the subjunctive. Now on to the imperative. The imperative is a mood of command. It's a mood of urgency. So one way to think about the imperative is with an exclamation point. Now there's a spectrum. On one side of the imperative, there's authority. On another side is just urgency. And the imperative is generally more toward urgency over here. The idea of authority does come into play, but we will see in a moment that the subjunctive can often be a very authoritative statement, especially limited really to negations. But we often think of imperatives as do not do something, and when there's an authority figure or an authority involved in negating something, that is often the subjunctive that is doing that. It's the imperative that is often urgency. Now, that's a spectrum. Again, we're in between there, but that is one rule of thumb, that when we're talking about not doing something, the negation is especially strong and authoritative when the subjunctive is doing it, more so than even the imperative. Characteristics of imperatives: they can be to individuals or groups. The third person imperative is translated let him or let them. The second person obviously is just you do it. The present has that aspectual frame of continuity, continuous, continue on doing something. The aorist, the perfective or undefined, again, is just something that happens. Just there it is in a snapshot without a view to progress. So the difference again between the aorist and the present is that here there's no view of progress. Context matters so much. You saw this with the subjunctive and the infinitive. With these non-indicative moods, context is just so important. Try to be fluid in your translation and get the idea across. The imperative morphemes, as Mounts lists these, we have on page 386, have your textbook open, as always, when we go through the slides, page 3 to 6 is where I'm at. We have in the second singular with both the active, the present active, aorist active, and aorist passive. There's a question mark. It could be different endings, the middle passive likewise, but then there's stability with the toe, te, toson, sto, ste, stoson, with the middle and passive. Now, this is the sort of introductory framework for these morphemes, and on the next few slides we'll tease out the differentiation between especially the aorist and present, and then voice as well. So we begin with the present imperative. The ending, just the there is no ending, so just epsilon becomes our ending, and then you see the to, te, toson, and then u for the second singular middle. So this is the middle, here's the active, here's the passive. Sto, ste, stoson, u, sto, ste, stoson. And you see the connecting vowel epsilon here along the way. We are used to that with the second singular and plural. And here that epsilon, because there is no ending, just the becomes the ending in an actual text. Let's think about second aorist then. And already I want to note for you the similarity and Then notice the similarity toe, toe, te, te, toson, toson. So you see the similarities, and as I've noted in the last couple of chapters, try to remember how the patterns we learn in the indicative are reflected in the non-indicative, like the subjunctive, and now here in the imperative, but there's some nuances, but let those patterns continue on. And the pattern with the second aorist, we just have our root that's taken up in the stem, lob here, and then we add on the endings, to, te, toson, following the connecting vowel. Notice the pattern continues, u, sto, sto, ste, ste. All the way down here, our pattern is consistent until we get here. The AT, we have a T here, and the lengthening eta, again to signify the passive. This is our middle section, so this is passive, middle, and here's the active. And then toe, again, which reflects back up here, te, back here to the active, and toson. But this is a pattern we've seen before, right? Because we've seen there's correspondence with the active and passive in the aorist. And what signifies the difference between the two is that here in the passive, the tense formative eta, the alpha is lengthened to eta often, but here it's just a lengthening of the connecting vowel, and that's going to signify the tense formative for us, the A for the second aorist. But just for a minute again, notice the similarities, to, to, te, te, toson, toson, u, sto, sto, ste, ste, stoson, stoson. Exactly the same until we get here to the passive. So look how similar, just in endings, we have between the present and the second aorist. I want to present now all three columns, the present, the second aorist, and the first aorist. And you've noticed that in the previous couple of slides I built from the present to the second aorist. Now we're going to add the first aorist. And to memorize the imperative paradigm, which you see here in full, I have tried to maximize the similarities between the various tense stems and how they are expressed in the active, in the middle, and in the passive. So let me identify them again. Here we have There's a similarity. We also have, when we get to the first aorist, the ending is son. So just working left to right, son. And then when we come down to the passive, we have the similarity of T and T. Now the distinguishing factor of theta eta here in the first aorist, just the eta in the second aorist, as I noted earlier. But notice the similarities, and I'm just going to erase here again just so that we can identify those similarities, and I'm going to move through this a little more quickly just as I have it memorized. When I think about this entire paradigm, I think son, t, toe, te, toson. And notice how similar that is all the way across. I'm going to go back over those now again. Son, t, then toe, which toe, the second, or excuse me, the third singular is toe all the way across. S on T here, those two are T, toe, and then te here, and toson. So let me draw that one more time. Trying to get rid of all the red markings here, and now let me draw it just with the highlighter. Son, t, toe, te, toson. Are you seeing how this can be drawn up? Let me just change the color for a moment. Son, t, toe, that again, toe, te, toson. The endings are the same, and now I have memorized half of the imperative paradigm with just the simple S on T, toe, te, toson. That's it. If I have those endings, then I can just go and plug in again the eta ending versus the theta eta, and that's about all I need to do in keeping those patterns for the second and first aorist passive respectively. So just to walk through this now again with the red, son, t, toe, te, toson. That's it. And I have now memorized half of this paradigm. Let's see if we can do the other half. Let me erase this. So that's S on T, toe, te, toson. And if I have that ending pattern down, I can just go and plug in the tense formative for the second aorist, the eta here down in the passive, and the theta, eta for the aorist passive. Otherwise, I am good. I can have these down. I know the differences between stem and that might occur between the present and the aorist, and I'm good. So that's the active all taken care of, as well as the aorist passive. So I have, in a sense, finished these off just with S on T, toe, te, toson. But now I have these other cells to take care of. Can I memorize them? Well, again, notice the pattern. Oo, oo, exactly the same, just as we had and eh. The difference with the first aorist psi, just like we had with the son. So we have oo, psi, and then we come back down here to oo with the present. And we've seen this before, that the present middle is often the same as the present passive. In fact, they're always the same. The middle passive go together, the present active stands alone. So we have oo, sigh, oo. And now notice how consistent we have it. Stow, stow, stow. Ste, ste, ste. And here in the third singular. And then, I missed stow here in the third singular, but now the second plural, ste, 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 and here the second plural. And then the third plural, both here in the middle and in the passive, stoson, stoson, stoson here, and stoson here. Let me go back through and solidify this a bit for you. Again, we've already memorized half of this paradigm with son, ti, to, te, to, son. And here we can memorize the other half with oo, sigh, oo, stow, 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 ste, 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 stoson, 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 stoson. Oo, sigh, oo, stow, ste, stoson. In those simple phrases, we have now been able to memorize the endings for the full paradigm. And if you can find your way through by just those endings, you can then plug in the tense formatives and so forth. So let me walk through the present here, the middles for all the way across. So I'll walk through the middles and then the present passive. So oo, sigh, oo, stow, ste, and stoson. Erase it and bring it through just with full lines then. Oo, sigh, oo, stow, and notice stow all the way across, and here stow, ste, ste, all the way across and down to the second plural, ste, stoson. Same all the way across here. So full paradigm then, and if I can get this down, it will help me just so much. So son, ti, to, here to, te, here toson. Then for the present here, the middles all the way across, and then the present, middle, and passive. Oo, sigh, oo, stow, all the way across and down, stow, ste, all the way across and down here, and stoson, all the way across and here. Son, ti, to, te, toson, oo, sigh, oo, stow, ste, stoson, and that fills the entire paradigm. If we are going to negate something, again, I bring this up from the previous chapter here, a couple of chapters ago on the subjunctive. The hina can be a purpose, and when it is negating, it's strong with may or oo may especially, and it's here where this oo may in the subjunctive is a very strong and authoritative do not, a purposed not, a conditional not, and so forth. the negation with the subjunctive carries a level of, again, of authority to it that is even beyond the imperative when we're talking about negation. So prohibition and negation, we think of a simple, and the future indicative is a simple negation. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, and so forth. If we're thinking about stopping a continuous activity, we have may with a present imperative. Do not worry about your life. Just, you're worrying now, stop it. Just present imperative. If we're thinking about an undefined or theoretical activity, the aorist imperative might be involved. Do not let your right hand here, Matthew 6:3, know what your left hand is doing. And here's our imperative. Just this theoretical kind of an idea, the aorist imperative. The idea of warning, notice it's not the imperative, but the subjunctive that comes up. Do not suppose I came to destroy the law and the prophets. Don't think that way. Stop and be warned. And then the aorist subjunctive with may, notice the distinction between may and may, is the stronger, not on your life. The heavens and the earth will pass away, future indicative. But my words, mark it well on your life, me par elthosin. They will never pass away. I want to show a couple of charts here. With the imperative, we have a chance to think about software, and we're now toward the end of the class, and you may be interested in purchasing Bible software. It can help you to learn grammar, and here I have a chart from Accordance. Here we have imperatives in the Gospels, and you can notice that the imperatives sort of spike here early on, and this is Matthew, early on here, Sermon on the Mount. So we have a spike in the imperatives. In Luke, Sermon on the Plain, there. Mark 13, Mark's discourse paralleling along with Matthew 24 and Luke 21, the Olivet discourse there, where Jesus is talking about the temple in the future, many imperatives there, and you can see those. Having Bible software helps you to pull this up. I pulled this chart up in 20 seconds, and you can see patterns, and that can be so helpful for you. Imperatives in Paul. When you're preaching through or doing a Bible study, it's helpful to know where various parts of speech are, and notice that the imperatives often surface at the end of letters. So here's Romans, and here it's the latter portion of Romans that has the commands. When we think about Ephesians, we see that same pattern develop. Here's the latter part of Ephesians. Colossians, exactly the same. 1 Timothy, same principle. It's the latter part of the book, because the author will often, in the beginning of the book, like the first half of Ephesians and Colossians, if this is part 1, this is part 2, here we have the ideas sort of explained that we might think of as the indicative statements, and then we have the imperatives that follow from those indicatives. This chart is from Logos Bible Software, and the next one here, I've broken things down just a bit more specifically with the imperative. So this is the second person singular imperative, and the font is quite small. You maybe need to get up pretty close, but this kind of research can be helpful for you. Say you're doing a Bible study with maybe young men or young women, and or people who are in an individual sort of state of life, or a collegiate study, or you're preaching at an event, a leadership event, and you're talking to individuals, maybe not so much a church, but just an individual sort of grouping, and you're thinking about what the New Testament commands are that are directed toward individuals. So the second singular here. And we have in Matthew 5 a few here. We look further at Mark 2. we may want to look at Mark 2 because there's a number of imperatives that are in the singular there. Mark 10 over here as well. But what gets our attention is right here. 1 Timothy 4 and 5. So many singular imperatives, and we may want to stop there and think about that and think about ministry. And here, where we have a spike, we may want to stop and look at that. And this can be a helpful tool. By looking at specific grammatical forms, we can then see what ideas are expressed in those grammatical forms, and that can be so helpful for preaching or teaching. Here we have the present active imperative second plural. So here we're speaking to a group, we're speaking to our church, and we want to know what the New Testament would command the church together. And so we take a look, and again, the font is very small here. We have all of this put together in just one slide. But Matthew 6, we have a bit of a spike there with the plural commands. Mark 13, again, just as we saw a lot in the previous chapter, Mark 13, a number of imperatives in Mark 13. Similar with Luke. Here, a number of imperatives that we may want to look at. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, a spike in plural imperatives. So what's 1 Corinthians 10 about? We may want to go and look that up and just see what kind of ideas are communicated with this grammatical form. Ephesians 4 and 5. That makes sense, doesn't it? We're aware of a number of imperatives there. But notice the spike in 1 Thessalonians 5. That may clue us to some fellowship kinds of ideas, some corporate exhortations. And this kind of charting can be so helpful for you. And it may be the time to invest in some Bible software. Vocab starter, again, we have our root and stem, apolumi, the more creative you can be, apollyon, I destroy. Apoluo, a pal, I would release a pal. Apoluo, I release. Ate, ate, I ate if I wanted to. Whether the food was good or bad, I guess I ate anyway. I don't know, try to think of some way to communicate that, but ate rhymes a little bit with ate, and that might be helpful. Continue to keep up on vocab. This bridge idea is just crucial. Don't let go of these bridges, because that's what's going to help you have a word picture, some connection between the actual form and its definition.